Good morning, America. How are ya? Monday morning rail. We'll be 500 miles before the day is done. They call me the native son. Hi, I'm Denny Jelsma, and I'm at the world-famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum, where running trains is an absolute pleasure. Today is Monday, and you know what we do on Monday? You guessed it. We do show and tell. And show and tell is going to start in just a moment. But this show is always brought to you by Jelsma Graphics, the people that do the embroidery railroad clothing. So always go to jelsma.com for all your embroidery railroad needs. And with that being said, show and tell starts right now.
Hi, it's Richard from the Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum again. Today we're going to talk about roads on the layout, not the rail. Now, I didn't install all these. I've done one or two things around here. I've done some of these at home once I learned about them here. First road we're going to talk about is this one right here by the Jacksonville Terminal. This is tar paper. This was installed by Rodney when he built this original module, and he put down some striping on it to represent the lines, roadway lines. Before we moved it here, where it was before, it had sustained some water damage. And the only way I knew to fix that was to take a paintbrush, dip it in some kerosene, and you just start wiping the tar paper, which is petroleum based. That loosened up a little bit of the surface, dissolved into it the white stain from the rain, from the water that had contaminated it, and just mixed it up and thinned it out so where we had a fresh looking asphalt road again. In the process, it dimmed the extreme whiteness of the striping that was on the road, made it look a little more natural. So that's one road surface you can use as tar paper. Another road surface is right up here. This is a foam material. You can get a Hobby Lobby or Michael's or wherever, but it comes real thin. This is a gray version. I use this for sun damaged roads that have been in place for a while. This darkness black can represent a fresh asphalt road. You can even put down some other color and just paint it. Again, we just measured the width of the road for this light residential area. You can put markings down the road to mark the middle of it. But just make sure that you have your ties in place before you put this down. That works better for us. We measure and put the ties down first, either spike them or glue them. This one looks like it's glued in place. Make sure you leave space for the flanges, and then come back and cut your foam to fit. I have put this down in my home layout using white glue, PVA, or carpenter's glue, or canopy glue, whatever I have available. Since it's such a large area, I usually use PVA. Okay, next surface is right here. An old brick parking lot. When this module was first brought here, these bricks were extremely large. They were like an O-scale brick, which to my eye looked a little, larger than it should be. So I had purchased, is that in focus there? Mm-hmm. The Scale Scenes computer file. And once I purchased it, it's now on my computer and I can print out brick whenever I want to. I used it here to resurface this parking lot. I have also used it as wall material on the interiors of buildings. It's paper and it's printed with inkjet ink, so be careful with water around it. I sprayed the backside of this with a clear paint, apple spray can, just to seal it on the backside so the PVA would not attack the ink through the paper. And it's been here several years now without any problems. Once you glue down your roadway, if you don't have any pinstripes material around, you can use this, which is a white ink, or more like they call it a jelly roll. at least this version. And I've used this at home, and it works pretty good. Just put down a straight edge if you got a straight piece, and just drag it along and make your lines on the road. Okay. Let's go elsewhere.
Okay.
Here we're up in Hillyard, Florida, and it's a very rural area. So most of the time we have just gravel roads, maybe even dirt roads, but this one's a gravel road. It's basically a cardboard underliner to bring it up to the height we wanted it. And in-scale gravel has been sprinkled on it and glued in place with PVA. On this crossing, the entire crossing is made of railroad ties. Again, they're either glued or spiked in. I can't tell from where I'm standing. But many rural railroads crossings were this way. Just whatever was around, whatever they had handy in stock. The railroads just throw down some ties and make sure the clearance is there for the flangeways. Moving down below, we're in South Jacksonville at Capital Concrete, and this road is again a mix of in-scale ballast, but it has a lot more black mixed in with the gray. Again, it represents just a different surface material that the roads were paved with around here. When this was laid down by Greg, he put in another cardboard liner to bring it up to the height he wanted, built some cardboard dams around the edges to hold everything in place, and then just poured in the gravel in place and applied alcohol to help break surface tension on the glue, and on the one-to-one glue mix, one-to-one water and glue with a little bit of soap added to it to make what we call wet water, which is, you can read about that in the literature. So we just put that on and let it soak up overnight, and that's pretty much it. Again, ties were put in place with clearance for the flangeways. This time that's pavement in between the ties for this particular crossing. Okay, let's get through here. Okay, this road here is an extremely rural backroads location. It is essentially a dirt road, maybe even some clay mixed in with it. All it is hydrocal, which comes as a powder form. Not hydrocal. Durham's rock hard putty is what it is. The rock hard comes as a powder in a round container. Just add water to the consistency you want and trowel it in place. Once we had it in place, ties already installed, we come along with some road vehicles, rolled them back and forth as it was hardening up to leave ruts in the road, like the dirt roads or mud roads. You always see them all the time if you get out into rural countryside. It was pretty straightforward. And since this is an extremely rural crossing, we've got crossbucks and no electronics. Again, just another road we have on the layout here. Okay, here we're at the what we call Dennis Road on the layout. It is basically plastic molded to look like HO scale brick. This is a Walthers set of roadway material. Comes as sheets of plastic, or I think pretty much already to the right dimensions. Now we wanted to represent in-rail pavement, but this is a little bit of a switching district. So Bill had to cut it to fit and cut everything to fit here. Again, the ties are glued or spiked in place. These are glued. And it represents a more industrial area of town. We've added some markings to represent grease spills and from vehicles passing back and forth over it, which is just basically paint. Since we don't want to use pastels, chalks on here, because as we move vehicles on and off, our fingers can smudge things around and make it not look like oil drippings. But it comes down this way to a T intersection with another road of the same material, and represents an industrial area. I believe it was built up a little bit with maybe some more cardboard, and then the plastic glue down on top of it. Added weights where necessary to make everything settled. Behind us, on the layout, this is what we call F&J yard. It is a major yard area for an industrial area. Again, Bill used ready-made plastic brickwork that he filled in all these spaces in between, and then came back with real thin plaster to represent concrete poured on top of the brick. You see right here, he's worked some of the plaster down in the mortar between the brick faces, and then came back and once it's solidified, he came back and sanded everything down to make it real smooth and look like concrete that's being worn off of the bricks in place. Now, one of my favorite things is this, what he used for crossing material in these two tracks. Instead of using wood, he used pieces of rail. So there's rail sitting on top of the ties in here. Once those were set up by glue, he came back in with the concrete material and immersed it inside the rail heads. Again, it looked like they just used rail they had laying around to make a crossing here. Now, one important thing, electrically we're talking now, in between here somewhere, you got to put a plastic piece, a very thin strip of plastic, to separate the positive and negative sides of the rail, because this is all metal rail in here, unless you're using plastic inserts. But this was all metal rail. You put a little piece of plastic in between the middle here, and it is buried in the concrete, or plaster is what he used. So this is a railhead crossing, which you see in industrial or rural areas, or used to anyway, until they started paving over them. Just be sure that you put some sort of electrical separation between the positive side and the negative side of the rail, and you'll have no problem with your vehicles running along the rail or plastic vehicles crossing it. So that's it. Talk to you later.
Well, thank you, Richard. That was very interesting. We really appreciate it. And we want to thank all the listeners that watch our show and tell every Monday morning. And the views just keep going. And I also want to remember, Richard has his very large following. He has 8x10 glossies that he will sign for you and give to you absolutely free. He signs autographs on Friday morning from 8 to 8:30, and Richard knew that just did this last program, and that's the way it is at the world famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum, where running trains is an absolute pleasure, and peace and harmony.